Welcome to Life List, a birding podcast. Hey there, everybody, and welcome back to Life List. I am your host, Molly Brown, here with our co-hosts, George Armistead and Alvaro Jaramillo. Guys, have you been birding lately?
Oh, yeah.
Me too.
Out and about.
Yeah.
How's it been?
Boats.
I know, Al, you've been offshore a ton, right? I mean, that's pretty much all you do this time of year, right?
It's just pretty much all I do. Yeah.
Rinse, wash, repeat.
Yeah. But enough about me. Later I'll tell you a bit more about what's going on. But what do you guys been seeing?
Well, I was down the Eastern Shore of Maryland last weekend with some friends and just enjoyed, nothing crazy, but like my folks' place there, I did have like some nice, breeding birds and a few migrants. I had several flocks of semi-palmated plovers flying over, which I think is a bird I've only had there like once or twice before. It was a yard bird from an eBird perspective. So they were moving south, and I had like multiple flocks, one which had a least sandpiper in it. That was pretty cool. A feature now that seems to be regular in our yard are brown-headed nuthatches, which are one of my favorite birds in the whole wide world. The little rubber ducky sounding brown-headed nuthatches, one of Kristen's favorites as well. They seem to be in the yard nesting there in the big loblolly pines. So we had those again. That was awesome. Kristen spotted a gorgeous adult great horned owl in the yard that looked like it had a big prey item. We couldn't quite tell what it was, either like a small baby woodchuck or a rabbit or something. We watched that thing for, maybe 15, 20 minutes before it finally flew off. That was pretty awesome. Also had I had an adult yellow-billed cuckoo feeding a juvenile yellow-billed cuckoo. And my father, who's kept pretty much immaculate records from this farm since 1950, he says, I mentioned this to him. He said, we've only ever had them feeding young there in the yard once before, and it was like on the same date from like 20 years ago. So that was pretty cool. And then here in Philly, the garden's popping. It's been great. I've been out trying to do like a little bit of morning flight stuff as songbirds are starting to heat up. I haven't really had a very good day yet, but like there's been some days where I reached double digits warblers going over, and I'm identifying probably 3% of those birds that are flying over. But did get a blackburnian, which was actually new for the yard here, kind of surprising one, and had a bank swallow go over the yard, which is a particularly good one, I'd say, for this location. Also new for the yard. So yeah, I've been out a fair amount, and a little hoarse because I was at the Phillies game last night with my nephew. Had a good old time there. The Phils have been picking it up. And so just been out and about, getting ready to go to Brazil soon in about a week's time. And I don't know if I mentioned this to you guys, but the flight from Philadelphia to Sao Paulo, there's a direct flight. Did I talk about this?
Nope.
There are typically 0 direct flights from Philadelphia to Sao Paulo, but I managed to find one. I was so excited about it. I was like, this is awesome. And then I realized it's because the Eagles' home opener, quote unquote, is in Sao Paulo the day that I arrive. So that flight is going to be chock-a-block Eagles fans. It's going to be like, I don't know how many people are on that flight, 80, 100, I don't know. It's going to be all Eagles fans, I guarantee it, at least 80%. So I'm going to have to get my gear out and be ready to go on that flight. It should be fun.
Direct flight, it's going to be like more like 250 people. Right?
Yeah, I have I should say I don't know how many Eagles fans are going to be there. And I assume, if it's a direct flight of that length, I guess you're right. Yeah. But yeah, it should be fun.
That's going to be a party.
Should be a rowdy crowd, I imagine.
Yeah.
You want to sleep though?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. Not
now.
The worst part is that, I didn't know this prior to scheduling the trip. If I, they hadn't announced the game date yet. And if I had known, I might have tried to just adjust my just adjust things slightly such that I could actually go to the game in Sao Paulo. But as it stands, I'll probably be taking off from Sao Paulo, flying to Campo Grande right around the time of kickoff. So I will miss that. But still, it should be quite an experience. And the trip itself, of course, is going to be marvelous. So really excited for first Hillstar trip to the Pantanal and the Atlantic Forest as well.
When you're in, I guess it's your first Hillstar trip to Brazil, but when you're in Brazil, do you try to pronounce things in Portuguese, even though they look like Spanish, or do you kind of your brain defaults to Spanish? So,
I totally default to Spanish, and this is going to be a real challenge for me. Jason Weckstein, who is my my co-guide on this one, his Portuguese is pretty good, and he has been trying to coach me up a little bit, but I would say I've to this point have not been a great student.
Huh. Hey, I had to look up. So I've heard you say many times the Eastern Shore or Maryland or something like that, and I had to look up what this state looks like, and it's really, I get it now, but it's a very complicated looking state in terms of its shape. It's like a puzzle piece that is the one, like, you go, oh, that one's not right. I mean,
is that everything that was left over after they took all the other chunks of land?
Yeah, it's the scrapple of states, and then it's got this tiny little neck,
Yeah, Western Maryland there.
Yeah, and
great.
I had no idea. So apologies to. I've been through there, but I've never really thought about the extent of the state and the fact that it has 3 shorelines. Really, actually.
Yeah.
Crazy. Oh wow.
Yeah, the Chesapeake Bay is obviously a big divider of the state. Baltimore over on the Western Shore side, and Eastern Shore has no big cities really. Salisbury, Cambridge, Easton, kind of smaller towns.
That's the first thing I've learned by being on Life List, actually.
That's it. Huh?
That's it.
Not bad.
That's funny. Yeah, the Western Maryland birders do a lot of birding in West Virginia too. It's kind of its own little subset, because how else can you imagine being over here in Garrett County on the far western edge, missing out on all that state action?
Yeah,
I just watch it from afar, and by afar I mean a couple miles from the border.
It's fun birding in Garrett County, but yeah, I would imagine if you were there all the time, you would definitely branch into some neighboring West Virginia counties.
Yep, that's what happens. I have been trying to figure out how specific Ducks Unlimited, does a lot of different conservation work. They also do work with private landowners. And I watched this University of Maryland Extension video series last year that was on waterfowl habitat management, and it was hosted by Ducks Unlimited. And I saved that video for a year, and then I was finally ready to reach out and ask for some technical assistance for doing that here at our place. And then I realized their region is the Chesapeake Bay watershed, and that's in the middle of Garrett County, and I'm in the Mississippi watershed. So been having that discussion with them on like what they can do across state lines, what they do for separate watersheds. And it's an interesting place over here. Things, separate, and that's part of the appeal for Garrett County, and lots of things that are unique there. Birds, butterflies, salamanders, all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, the watersheds are pretty cool when you start thinking about them and looking at maps of watersheds at the local level, and then the larger level. I was surprised in Alberta. There's places where you go if you're on a bird trip where it flows to the Arctic Ocean essentially, and there's other parts that flows to the Pacific, and other parts that flows down towards the Gulf, or to the and you're like, wow, it all it has to happen somewhere. But these sort of watershed divides are pretty cool places.
Oh yeah. I always feel like it's a special thing when you cross. There's a sign on the interstate here that says when you're switching over the Continental Divide that separates the Mississippi and Chesapeake watersheds. So it's a cool feeling to think about that.
Yeah.
Sometimes when we get on these podcasts and I know we're going to start by talking about our recent birding, I feel so nervous because I feel like I haven't done any birding lately. And then I feel like I'm I don't know, bad birder. I'm going to get kicked off or something. But I've been birding a lot too. And it's been
That's the
great.
t-shirt brought to you by Lifeless, Bad Birder.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. But yeah, lately I feel like I've done all the birding. I like all the different ways. I've been getting out in the mornings and been starting to get some flocks of fall warblers and that sort of thing. A lot of warblers are coming through a little bit earlier than usual through here. Funny you mentioned the yellow-billed cuckoo, George, because this is a shorter history. This is like year 4 that I've checked on our property, but we have had way fewer yellow-billed cuckoos around this part of West Virginia this year than the past few years that I've really paid attention to it on a local level like this.
My take is that those things have been in a nosedive for a bit, but I don't actually have any
Well,
data.
that too.
Yeah.
What was the cicada situation over your way?
Yeah, I don't know this year. I've heard
that's a theory I've heard.
Yeah, I've heard what seems like a similar amount, but I'm not sure. But I just, they seemed abundant growing up on the Eastern Shore, birding there. And I used to, I feel like on all our drives down, I would to the farm, I'd always see 1 or 2 crossing the road just routinely. And that just doesn't really happen as much. So.
Yeah, that's been missing around here this summer. But I do a breeding bird survey close to broadwing hawk soaring by overhead. Yeah, been a lot of those coming through today.
Yeah, they're already moving.
Yeah, they really are. But yeah, over along the Ohio River, it was my highest number by a lot of yellow-billed cuckoos that I'd had on a breeding bird survey. So go figure. But yeah, I've been doing a little bit of hawk watching just from the place here. Lots of nighthawks moving through. That's been really fun every evening. Big numbers congregating in some places, but then also just a few going overhead. And shorebirding's been pretty good over here too. That really depends in a lot of ways on the habitat management of the places where they end up stopping over around here. A lot of different wildlife management areas where I think we talked about this recently. Sometimes they monitor the water levels pretty well for shorebirds. Sometimes they don't, but there's just a lot of exposed mudflats. And when that's there, the birds are here in some number at least. So that's been really fun too. And I've put together this little fortress of hummingbird feeders around the cabin. And that's been really fun because now you look out any window and you see a couple or more hummingbirds zipping around. I've been starting to think about my winter feeder setup and messing around with that and repositioning stuff. So I just feel like every time of day I've been fitting in some birding and it feels pretty good.
Yeah. I had a couple calls yesterday afternoon and I was like, you know what, let me take these outside. I'll sit in the shade with the bins and just see what goes over. And I was actually hoping for my first broadwing of the season, but did have a couple ospreys that were way up high. It seems like they were a mile up heading south slowly. And I was like, they're starting to go.
Yeah,
the osprey actually kicks in a question I had about yellow-billed cuckoos, but osprey kind of is another one. Yellow-billed cuckoos kind of arrive moderately early, not too early, but not, they arrive in May, right? Then they're not fledging till August. They're really late breeders, right? Because they're waiting for these caterpillars and so forth. And I'm wondering, why do they arrive? What do they do in all that time between May and June? Are they just going around, moving around, looking for potential places that will have a ton of caterpillars? And they're therefore their population shifts annually depending where the food is. So they may be when you're thinking about populations, they may in fact be as common, but they're elsewhere in the East, not the state you live in. I'm wondering about them because they're really tied to these caterpillars, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing I was thinking was osprey. I always consistently saw that the first raptor I ever saw migrating south in the east when I lived there was osprey. And I thought, why would they migrate so early given that they eat fish and the fish are always available? I don't know. Is it that they're really bad at migrating? They're really slow. So or these are the ones that are going to Amazonia. They're the ones that are going really far.
That was my take, because there's some that winter not too far south of here. I imagine some of the ones that, like the couple I saw flying over high, I don't know where they were coming from. Could have been quite far north, I do know that a number of the birds that have been banded and tracked, Rob Bierregard is a ornithologist locally that has done a lot of tracking of ospreys. And I think quite a few in sort of the Delaware Bay, Chesapeake Bay area are either birds from northern South America or actually from Amazonia. That's where he's tracked them to.
Yeah. And what do you think about the cuckoos?
I was trying to see what I could find on BNA quickly.
I was just looking at my property records to see when the majority, because there are typically two breeding territories kind of at either end of our property here. And I was checking to see when I've recorded those because they're very consistent there in past years. And they're pretty much all beginning of May to end of July. This year I have 0, period. I don't know. You could theorize that they came here, were satisfied with it, established, or this year they didn't, or they came through quickly and I missed them and they just didn't stick around. But I don't know. There's a lot of interpretation to do there.
Yeah.
On a very small sample.
It's unusual for a bird to have such late fledging, right? I mean, but yeah. And then if they're around all year, it's one thing, but if they're migrating in from somewhere, then there's this time that's sort of like, what are they doing during that time? Are they
just looking briefly here, Al, at Birds of the World, BNA. I still have it like in my mind as Birds of North America, but Birds of the World, the phenology section. This is an incredible resource. Everybody should consider being a member of Birds of the World if you're not. But it's, it talks about the May arrival. It seems like east, west, wherever they generally arrive in May. And it starts off by saying
they're pretty late in the West, actually. They're they're much later, like really late May.
Okay. What I saw looked like it was mid to late May as opposed to sort of mid early May. But the first thing it says in phenology in pair formation is that there's little information. First brood of the season basically seems like it can happen almost any time between April and August. But anyway, there's a lot of info here. But it looks like, they can. To me, my understanding is that they're kind of almost eruptive. They do a lot of wandering around looking for where there's plenty of food, and I guess as a result, they probably can pop off, in a given area, kind of any time in that, May to August window, to try to take advantage of food the best would be my guess.
Yeah, I think they're wandering around for a long time looking for food, the right food, and then they plop down and actually nest.
Speaking, just from a Philadelphia perspective, both species are uncommon to scarce in the city limits, and probably even just outside, here in southeastern Pennsylvania. But they can show up anytime, So
yellow-billed and black-billed.
Yeah. Basically within that spring-summer window, they can pretty much show up anytime.
Do you know that they're not brood parasites, as many cuckoos are, but every so often I think it's black-billed cuckoo that will parasitize a yellow-billed?
I did not know that.
Ooh, I didn't know that either.
I think it goes that way, yeah. I think it's the less common one.
Yeah.
But because they eat the same kind of food, so it's like, it's set. Yeah.
It also says they may be double brooded in the central and eastern U.S. So there might be a couple different attempts, and it wouldn't be surprising, right, if they kind of spaced those out in different locations, perhaps.
Yeah, like breed in one site, then move to another site and breed again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool stuff. Some of these birds, I mean, they're relatively common birds, and we know very little about them still.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. George, how would you describe black-billed cuckoo habitat around you?
Well, here, they have, I think they have been recorded as breeders here in the Wissahickon Valley, which is kind of mature woodland, a lot of sweet gum and oak with a little bit of hemlock, but my take is that they're more at the fringes of the mature woodland where they're, kind of edge where there's kind of crappier habitat a lot of the time, not as, where there might be, an array of introduced stuff growing up. There's actually a couple blocks from here, there's a ball field and playground. And I believe they were documented calling there through June into July once. And I don't think we confirmed breeding, but it certainly appeared to be territorial there.
Mm-hmm.
So that was suitable for them. And it was kind of like tennis courts, baseball field, soccer field. And then that gave way to this semi-open meadow area and heavy woodland. But between the meadow and the heavy woodland is some kind of marginal stuff. And of course, it's a migrant. One of my favorite birds from my old condo downtown Center City, where there's almost no habitat at all. That was one of my best birds I ever had right there. In some really, in some Asian mulberry that was, an introduced tree, but the only vegetation available. So,
yeah, that's similar to how it's been here, but it's surprised me a bit just this year since I moved out to the higher elevations, because there you'd see them some, but they breed more in the higher elevations through West Virginia, and I always thought about them being in a pretty mature forest. And then around here where I live in Preston County, they're absolutely in that marginal forest, like next to a clear cut, or in some sort of autumn olive overgrown field with a couple cherry trees popping up or something like that. It's really surprised me.
Yeah, it's like beyond early successional growth, maybe, but before it seems like kind of brushy,
yeah,
just
that tangly mess,
but with some trees. Yeah,
it's always exciting to see one of those.
Oh my God!
By.
Blackbills also range way further north as a breeder than yellowbills. Yellowbills are really in that true, eastern hardwood, at least in the east, because there's also population in the west. But in the east, they're in that real true, big tree forest kind of stuff. And then they do wind up in really kind of crummy forested habitat edge stuff up north in Canada, further north, I should say, not up north, but
the rain crows.
The rain crows. I've really missed them here this year. Yeah. Well, another thing that I did yesterday, I had been in meetings the entire day the day before. I was completely worn out, went to sleep, woke up, thought I was going to get a lot of work done, and I just could not focus on stuff yesterday at all. And there's been this swallow-tailed kite hanging out and was reported consistently for several days over in the Eastern Panhandle, which is not an easy bird to get in West Virginia. I didn't have it on my state list. And it's also been like one of my most wanted birds because boy, do I love seeing them. And I thought the day before, maybe I'll go get this kite tomorrow. If I hurry up and get home after this and get some stuff done in the morning, or maybe I'll just wake up and go get it. And then I woke up and I thought, no, I'm going to answer emails first. And then I thought, well, if somebody reports it, I'll go get it. And then I thought, well, I'll eat lunch first. And then I ate lunch, and then I still wasn't being productive with work. So I took off and drove, and it was a little under 3 hours to get over there. And man, it's just this pin over kind of south of Hagerstown in the Eastern Panhandle of West Virginia. And there were reports for days saying that it had been flying around this field. I drove up to that field, and there it was. Just, as perfectly on point as it could possibly be, which blew my mind. But just, and I was so happy to see it. It really was a bird I'd wanted to see in West Virginia for a really long time. But after like this weeks of the swallowtailed kites had been around, it's a bird I've thought about for so long, and it takes me so long to convince myself to actually go chase a bird like this. And I would love to hear what y'all's rules are for your own birds that you chase, how you go about that. Do you does this resonate with you at all, this like internal conflict before it happens?
It's funny you mentioned swallowtailed kite, Molly, because I don't know if you would have seen, but there is today, this morning, I saw, I think it was Chad Kaufman posted to the PA Rare Birds Facebook group a video that I think it was like a non-birder that took with their phone of a beautiful swallowtailed kite, foraging.
Did not see this. Wow.
Yeah, and this is about 2 hours east of Morgantown, West Virginia, in the town of Everett, Pennsylvania. And like just the video of that, I was like, how far away is that? I was, I was, the wheels started turning. I was like, I would love for Kristen to see this bird, and I would just love to see it myself. I've been waiting for one here in the yard. Like it seems possible. There was one seen, what was it, last spring, like a couple miles from here. I think maybe there was one this spring, not far. I still remember hearing an English friend of mine describe, after seeing one of his lifer in Costa Rica, and he was talking to his girlfriend back home. He was like, I saw a swallowtailed kite today. It's really the sexiest of all raptors. And I was like, that's pretty good. Can't really disagree with that. So it's funny because I had that, like today I had that, and I don't chase much. Yeah.
Well, I've got a question for you then. This West Virginia one's closer. Would you go for the West Virginia one, or would you go for the Pennsylvania one and drive farther?
I'd probably go for the Pennsylvania one. So, I mean, it's probably really, I would think like Everett, it's kind of just west of what, like Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. It's probably about 3.5 hours from me. I was thinking for you, it's about 2 hours, but that's from Morgantown, so not really. But yeah, I don't know. I probably am biased towards going for the Pennsylvania one. Like I actually have a Pennsylvania list. It's not impressive at all because I don't prioritize it, but probably would go with that. Yeah.
I'm kind of so out of the chasing bird thing that, this slate-throated redstart that's in San Francisco, seen daily, super rare, first for the state. I haven't gone.
A lot of people been twitching that.
Yeah, I mean, people have been coming from all over the place to see it. There was at one point where I had a pelagic trip, and I was going to go through that. I was basically going to go by 2 blocks away, but I really didn't have time, and I just sort of drove by, and it doesn't get me. I have no feeling towards it other than I'm glad that people see it. I would have loved to have found it. That would have been a totally different thing. And yeah, I to drive 3 hours for a bird for me. I would drive 3 hours for cool birding, like just to go to the Sierra and, see things I don't see daily. That would be, I do that kind of thing, or go in the winter down to the Central Valley and go look for hawks and the geese flocks and cranes and all that. But for a rarity, it would have to be something that would spark something emotional. So, let's say it was a Siberian accenter. I would go and see that because other than the one I saw one time, I've never seen one again, and don't have a picture, and I feel like it's a special bird to me. I would go to see a Terex sandpiper, even though I've seen a bunch of them in Asia, because I just think it's cool. But, there's been a lot of other super rare birds here that I never went to see. So it's kind of like weird. I mean, I have feeling no loss or FOMO, nothing. In fact, it's the opposite. When I've tried sometimes to go see some bird that was sort of almost on the way and I haven't seen it, I start going, gosh, I could have just been birding.
Yep.
And I don't, yeah, I feel the loss of time in birding rather than the loss of you know what I mean?
Of the one bird.
Yep.
Of the
I
one bird.
absolutely know what
Yeah.
you mean. Yeah.
So,
That's particularly on the days that or stretches of time where I haven't been birding as much. I think that's a factor for me too, is why not just go have a nice morning in my local patch rather than devote half of a day to go for something else.
yeah. And I haven't, there's nothing wrong with it. That's the thing. I
Yeah.
think some people feel like when I express my views that I'm anti chasing, twitching, listing, and it's
Right.
not. It's just
you're judging yourself, no one else, right?
Yeah, it just doesn't do anything for me. If I was like totally psyched and like excited about it, I'd be like, yeah, I'm gonna do this. But it usually isn't that way. Like I'll be like, should I stop for the whatever? What you know.
Yep.
Yeah. Yet if it's close, it's different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I feel that way about most listing categories that like I don't care about chasing ABA birds at all. I do not want to set myself up to feel the pressure to fly across the country for something that just sounds horrible. I'd rather go to where the birds typically are in a lot of cases, and that's my reasoning, and that's how I lose zero sleep over that. My West Virginia list, and we all talk about how we're not listers on here. I still would say I'm not, but if there's one list I care about the most, that's it.
That's legit.
And then yeah, I think West Virginia is a really fun state to do state listing in too.
Yeah, it's hard, right?
It is hard. Yeah, there's plenty to be discovered, and some of these things, like I said, like shorebirds. It's been a really good year species wise for shorebirds, and like I said, there's just been a lot more habitat availability for shorebirds to stop over on too. So that is great. It's also pretty accessible. I mean, I can get anywhere in the state in 4 hours or less. California is a little different than that.
Yeah.
Even some of the states that are just a funkier shape, like Maryland. Like if I were a Garrett County, Maryland birder, I don't think I would care about my Maryland list. But every time I see a new bird for West Virginia, there's also like a little bit more pressure to see the next one.
Mm-hmm.
And that's tough. But yeah, swallow-tailed kite, it felt good.
Yeah. I think that gets to what Al's saying too, which is that it has to kind of trigger some kind of emotional response, right? Like there's some birds I just don't that would that are cool, whatever, they're fine, but they don't really speak to me. They don't tug at my soul. Swallow-tailed kite is one of those ones that tugs at my soul. Like slate-throated redstart's a great bird, and if it was close to me, yeah, I'd probably go look at it. But it's not. I'm not going to make a pilgrimage for it. I did make a pilgrimage for the flamingo. I have tried multiple times regionally to see gyrfalcons, even though I've seen plenty of gyrfalcons before, but that's just a bird that, speaks to me. It's largest falcon in the world. It's just an amazing bird, right? Like, and I have driven a couple hours to try to see them. I will note that aside from having seen them when I was about 7-year-old, including a white one, there was 2 that hung out at a quarry in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I have no memory of seeing those birds. The first one I remember seeing was in Nome, and actually was a white one. In fall when I was up there one year. And I've since seen, I don't know, 10 or 20, I don't even know, in Alaska over the years. And I keep chasing them around here just because seeing that bird here means something to me, even though it's not about listing. It's like I want to see that bird that is such a remarkable bird and occupies such a unique space in, natural history here. Like that is something I would like to see. And, I remember I went and chased the bean goose, which was a solid 45 minutes away from my house, right? It wasn't a backbreaker of a day. But at the same time, Steller sea eagle was something I really would love to see, but I just could not rationalize making basically killing at least one day, if not two, to go
Mm-hmm.
up to Maine to chase that thing. And if it was a little closer, I might have rearranged my schedule. But I'd rather spend those 10 hours of driving birding locally, than driving in the car. So yeah, I think the emotional tug, the spiritual, beckoning that Al was kind of hinting at, and that you were saying about that swallow-tailed kite for you, is a big, big part of it for me.
And any emotional beckoning for Eurasian tree sparrow? No? Yes? No?
I did chase one in Jersey once.
You
I
did,
chased
actually?
one.
Oh, my
Yeah.
gosh.
I mean, I think they're cool. Also,
I think they're
that bird
cool.
got voted down, I believe, by the New Jersey Records Committee. Like, they did not accept it, and I thought that was probably a mistake. But anyway,
Yeah, I went. My last chase was brewer sparrow. It was a mile away. But I realized I'd never seen it in my home 5 mile radius. So I was like, oh, that's good. And I don't have a really good photo. So I thought all of it added up to like, yeah, I'll devote half an hour to an hour on that. But if that had been, across the hill and I'd had to drive 30 minutes for it, I would not have gone.
yeah.
Yep. I get that. Oh, well, Alvaro, we skipped over your updates earlier, but you've been very busy and you've been doing a lot of birding that we haven't talked about yet. So what's it been like out there on the ocean?
Well, yeah, it's been interesting. If you go back to some of the earlier episodes we had, I might have talked about the fact that we had this really cold water, and then there was a lot of food, and then stuff started showing up, and things were a little odd. Well, now it's gone really warm. It's like flipped completely, and it's gotten very calm. So there have been days and days and days of very little wind over the last couple of weeks. In fact, our last pelagic was just flat calm almost, the last couple of them, and it's created something interesting, in that this water has brought in stuff that is associated with that warmer, bluer water. And the main one is Buller shearwaters. And we have been seeing, they just sort of started, and then we just saw tons of them. And it's not every year that you get a lot of bullers. You can have in any one year maybe a day where you'll see 100 or something, or 50, or good number. But this day we've probably underestimated, and we were doing 1,300 bullers, and then just flocks of them. And they have a unique, to me, behavior in that they will get into single species flocks offshore. When there are no bullers around, you will have these mixed species, like sooties mixed it with pink-footed, maybe something less common in there. But when there are numbers of bullers, you will see single species bullers only flocks just sitting there, and they associate with, it tends to be days also that you see Arctic terns, the Jaegers, South Polar skua, sometimes offshore murrelets. And recently I've realized that those days, the big bullers days, are when we find Guadalupe fur seals. So all of it is happening right now. And there's also lots and lots of marine mammals, including, we saw short-beaked common dolphin, which is not the norm here, and big numbers of Pacific white-sided dolphins. It's just really interesting this year. And the two different fishing boats, people, one of them, the crew that we work with here in Half Moon Bay, sent me a video and photo yesterday of a Nazca booby that they found while they were fishing. And last week there was another Nazca booby that another set of fishing folks found, and it was an adult, and this one was a juvenile. So two different ones. And I'm thinking, wow, I think there's suddenly Nazca boobies all over the place. So I'm hopeful that tomorrow we can find some of this stuff. And if this goes out on, what is it, Monday, we will have
Monday,
about
yep.
14 more trips until the end of October. If any of you live near in California and want to go on and catch this situation, you with pelagics, don't wait. Like if stuff is happening, go as soon as you can because the conditions could totally change. Yeah, and sort of that whole warm water thing is over. So it's been really interesting. And lots of fin whales still. I think I talked about that. They're still around, and interesting year. And I'm sure there's vagrant birds that we're going to find in the next few weeks too. But I don't want to make one of my Nostradamus predictions quite yet. I need more data.
That doesn't track at all. But Al, do you have a favorite bird? You do so many of these trips. Maybe you don't, but do you have like a bird that you really look forward to sharing? That's one of your regular birds out there that you just particularly like to share with people?
On the pelagics?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's Buller's shearwater. It's like a really different looking thing, and if you see them well, they're just they have a look that implies one of these offshore petrels, yet they're a shearwater, so they're a little easier to see. You don't need the same you don't need to be 200 miles offshore kind of thing. So it gives people this look of like, wow, that looks like a lot of the birds I've seen in the book, in the seabirds book. But here I am looking at one of these things that has like the dark M pattern on the back and the just grays and blacks and whites in a really distinctive, crisp color, coloration pattern. And people often will say, oh, and it's kind of really graceful in flight. And you're like, yep, all of the above, so I think that's the one that that I like when they're around, and they're not always around. That's the other thing, I can always show somebody a sooty shearwater. That's cool, but bullers are a little bit more special. So yeah.
There is, I'm sure you do know this, that there is an Atlantic record from the U.S. of Buller's shearwater.
Yeah, in New Jersey, I think it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I remember right, and someone can write in and correct me, I believe it was spotted by David Allen Sibley.
Oh, really? Yeah.
On that boat trip. Yeah, and I that's the way I heard it, was that he was the one that spotted it. At least I think he was. Yeah, I'd be curious to hear the full story at some point. But yeah, it was late October. It was October 28th, 1984, off a boat trip in Ocean County, off Barnegat Light. Pretty amazing. It's the only one. It's a long time ago.
Yeah, there's nothing in Brazil or anything, right?
I don't think so. Let me see if there's anything South
Brazil
South
gets
America.
some weird records sometimes, but
I'm not seeing anything in the old eBird.
The old eBird. Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that tomorrow, with all the warm water and stuff, obviously a booby would be awesome, but I'm hoping that we have another push of these offshore merlets, scripses or Guadalupe or crevaries. We haven't had crevaries for a few years, so that would be good. And but yeah, I'm hoping the bunch of bullers are still out there.
That is a good looking bird.
Yeah. When you get those flocks of bullers like that, is that like a food availability thing, and like at some point it gets good enough that the bullers are coming and are out competing some of these other species, or what causes that transition from this sort of mixed flock of other species to something more consistent like that?
I think it's the water. So we tend to have cooler, cold to cool water that is brown or green in coloration, that has a lot of nutrients, but you can't see through it very much. And then there's this time at this time of year when sometimes it switches to bluer, so clearer, warmer. We will find blue sharks and things that we don't tend to see in the colder water. So it's an entirely different kind of habitat that sort of rolls in, and that's where the bullers tend to associate. We'll get them in the other types of waters, but when you have that warmer bluer water. It also has these little different fish instead of the anchovy and krill that you tend to get a little further inshore. There's these little fish called saury, Saury, and they kind of jump. They're like little long things, and you can see them jumping in the water. And every time I see saury, I'm like, all right, we're in that situation. We're in, and so I think it's the actual habitat that rolls into us at this time of year in some years, and then the bullers take over. They're associated with that water. Otherwise, they're probably further north or further offshore, or for the most part, is my guess.
Yeah. All right. I have another question for you. You're describing their graceful flights. If you were a birder who's never been on a pelagic, who's never taken a scope out on an ocean enough to see any sort of, deep water birds that are within eyesight from the shore or anything, and you can't even picture this, where do you start? Because I can say this from experience. Pelagics are intimidating. They're so mysterious that it can be really hard to just picture where to begin of what this experience is like and like how to appreciate that mystery. So how do you start like that? Like, how do you, it's like this interest that is so hard to fathom if you haven't experienced it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it differs between the East Coast and the West Coast, I would say. And in the West Coast, we have so much to look at times that people, I always tell them, just look at the common stuff to begin with. Like, figure out what a sooty shearwater looks like, and you may get a chance to see, 1,000 the first hour, and then look at common murres, and then build on that abundance. From the abundance, sort of drill down. But a lot of it is about flight styles. And one of the things that's really tricky is we will often have low wind in the morning and then higher wind in the afternoon as we're coming back. And then some newer birders will be like, so I learned the sooty shearwater, we're going out here, but now they're flying completely different. And I'm like, yeah, because the wind is picked up. They're flying completely different. And you have to have that in your head, like what the wind type is and so forth. But the fact that they saw them and knew that they were sooty shearwaters and that they're flying different, to me, it's like, you're paying attention. Like that's a lot. A lot of it is just paying attention to what's going on and repetitive looks at things. And a lot of people are out there looking for the lifers, but I almost feel like you should go out looking for the experience. Just go out and have people point out different things to you, and then you just watch them, photograph them, watch them, and so forth. And the lifers will come. But there are some people, I mean, in the old days of super listing, you would get some of the big time listers would sit in the cabin, basically napping until a good bird was called out. And I always thought, like, that is insane. You're here seeing some of the coolest birds on earth, and you're sitting in the cabin because they're not lifers. I mean, that
Right.
is that.
Or there's
actually,
there's people that get mad if you just stop to look at a whale.
Yeah.
Remember that used to happen.
Yeah. And I think that is where listing gets a bad name. Not because listing actually is there's anything wrong with it. But when you see a situation where you're like, wow, this is not necessary. You could just be enjoying the birds and be listing. You know what I mean? Like, that's where I thought it's. Anyway, I'm on a tangent now.
I think that's what we're here for.
Yeah.
I'm on a tangent could also be a t-shirt for this podcast. So
Lifeless. We're on a tangent. And George, what would you say on the East? Because you guys have a whole different set of things with, starting out at night. Sometimes it's totally different.
Yeah. And it's totally different depending on the season as well. Like our winter trips go out, 6, 7 in the morning, come back usually by 5 o'clock at night. Sometimes
like ours,
earlier.
Sort of. Yeah.
Yeah. And then our summer trips, in order, unless you're going off Hatteras, where you're pretty close to the continental shelf and you're pretty close to the Gulf Stream, two things that really are key for getting a variety of birds you can't get closer to shore. If you're going out of, up this way, going out of Delaware, Maryland, New Jersey, you got to get out. You got to spend a lot of time traveling to get to where you have your best chance at finding some of these things. So that usually that means an overnighter usually. So our summer trips are involve usually a night at sea, which is a completely different dynamic than. So there's that to consider. And also we don't have the volume of birds that you're dealing with there in the Pacific. We have really cool stuff we can see. And there are some days that do feature large numbers of birds. But often when you're looking for stuff that is low density anyway, and to look to be in the best areas for it, you're often not surrounded by even hundreds of birds. There'll be a bird here, a bird there. So I often say it's kind of like punctuated equilibrium, which is I think a term from people that study tectonic plates and geology and so forth. But like
evolution,
okay, maybe I guess it is. It's basically, you go through these periods of stasis where you're seeing a bird here, there, and then all of a sudden there's something dramatic that happens. And that something might be a pod of whales that are close by, or it might be a bird that simply streaks by quickly that everybody gets to see. That's unusual. It might be,
I like that. You put me an idea on my streaked shearwater. Yeah, that's what
there
we're
you
going to
go.
find.
I thought for a minute, I thought you were going a totally different direction. I thought you were talking about maybe doing a little streaking, but yeah,
not me. I don't. Not my style.
Going streaking. Yeah, no, nobody needs to do that. Yeah, but like sometimes that's the way it works. You just there's a bird that or maybe you get something that hangs around the boat. You get some bird that rockets by, and that can be dramatic, right? It's just the fleetingness of it and the rarity of it can be special. Or you get a bird that hangs around and is interested in the boat, and that can really make things exciting. I was just recalling about a week ago, one of the most exciting things that ever happened on a pelagic, and I might have talked about it on the pod here before. I don't remember, but I found the picture recently, and it was me. It was like a 20-year-old me sitting at the back of this boat that me and Brian Pattison, some others, about 20 of us went offshore Manteo, North Carolina, and we had a good day at sea, and we were heading back inshore, and all of a sudden, like kind of a youngish sperm whale surfaced. We're going like 12 knots or something. We're moving pretty quick, 11, 12 knots, something like that, moving back inshore. And this sperm whale surfaces pretty much right next to us, swimming alongside us as we go. And it followed us for, 20, 25 minutes, followed our boat, a sperm whale, like a 30-foot sperm whale. And looking down on it, we could see it rolling over on its side. We could see its eye checking us out, and then it'd roll back and it'd start swimming harder so it could catch up, and then it'd roll over and it would surface right next to the boat like a dolphin bow riding or something, except it was at our stern. And I've never heard about anything like that before or since. And it was shocking and amazing. And if I hadn't been there, I almost wouldn't have believed that it could happen. And, that was one of the best, most amazing things I've ever seen offshore. And it was not a bird, but there have been obviously many amazing bird moments. But I think that the wildlife, apart from the birds, is often the thing that kind of makes the experience. And I know that that's especially true for you guys out there, but I think it's less expected, like those Chilean devil rays that we had recently on a trip where there was like 7 of them surfacing, and, they thought they were looking at a big mat of sargassum, and then they roll up and it's these rays, So anyway, I've probably gotten off topic from the original question.
On a tangent, maybe?
No. Yes, possibly.
Was it a baby sperm whale, or is it like a?
I was wondering the same.
I think it was probably like a young adult or a teen. Okay. Because it was like we estimated it was like between 25 and 30 feet long. So youngish, certainly, but not like, I don't think it couldn't have been a baby, right?
So perhaps like a curious.
Yeah, curious.
stage.
Yeah, a very playful youngster.
Yeah. Yeah, because I was thinking if it was a real baby, maybe it was like lost its mom, and then it was like,
No,
but
it was bigger than that. It looked like it was just playing and having a good time, and for some reason we got to be the one to play with it. It was pretty amazing.
yeah, yeah. We do get every so often we get friendly humpback whales. We had them a couple of weeks ago, and they were just going under the boat. The boat, you just basically shut off the boat and just sit there in neutral, and then they go under the boat and come up really close, and look at you, and then they go under again and go on the other side and look at you, and it's really weird because it's obvious that they must have just eaten their full. They got nothing else to do, and they're like, okay, well, these things are inoffensive, and let's go see what's going on. I mean, they're curious. It's interesting. You know what was I forgot all about this. The other day, I'm on the phone with somebody from that works here offshore, and she said, "Hey, have you been on the Farallon cam?" And that there's a camera on the Farallon Islands that's that you can manipulate, like move it around to look at the island in case you.
People have found some amazing birds just through that cam, is my recollection. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, the cam was seeing this group of killer whales that was trying to tire out, and they thought actually maybe trying to attack humpback whales. And the cam was following the scene for hours. And then a boat that was there to pick up biologists and take them back then went and photographed all this. But it made the newspaper and the whole deal here. But it was interesting. You could get on and see this live footage of these killer whales, like, popping up every so often all around this humpback whale. There was no actual event where there was an actual attack, but the biologists on shore were thinking that that's what eventually might happen, once the whales were tired, and the humpbacks. And other people who are whale people said, no, killer whales, they never go for humpbacks. Humpbacks will chase them away. But apparently they have, and there are situations where these killers will chase humpback whales, but it's really hard to get to the final event where you can go, yes, it happened. It's all the evidence points that that's probably what was going on. But people were like logging in from all over, including a lot of whale researchers were told, they all got the word, and they were all plugged into this cam looking at this situation, making theories of what was going on. And they identified the individual killer whales too. So pretty cool, weird, tech, the internet, connectivity, and actually see something that was super, super, super rare live, So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Molly, a couple other notes that I wanted to say, because I know we're coming up on our time, but a couple things I think that people might not expect if they haven't done a pelagic trip before. First of all, I always say it's the hardest kind there is. The pelagic birding is the hardest kind there is. It is difficult, but it's thrilling also, and really fun once you get into it. But you're moving, the boat's moving, all that. The birds are studies in gray, brown, dark and light, and a lot of it. But the good part about that is that it's a totally different kind of birding than probably a lot of people have done before. Unless you've done a lot of hawk watching, it's a lot of gist birding, as they say, general impression, size and shape. Kind of, you're looking at the shape of something, the way it moves, the size, the structure. It's a really good way to start to learn that, and it takes time. But it's really a fun thing if you dedicate the time to it. So it's a good way to practice that. The other thing is that it's great socially. These trips, like you are out there usually with people that virtually every trip features a few people that have never been on a pelagic before, if not quite a few. And it also features quite a few people that have spent a lot of time at sea. and have a lot of experience and really know the birds and animals you're looking for. So it's a great opportunity to just mingle with a whole bunch of different people with a whole bunch of different levels of experience. And you're out there for usually at least 8-10 hours or whatever, which means you got a lot of time to just BS, talk with people, learn from them, learn stuff that's not even related to pelagic birding that much. But socially, it can be quite a lot of fun as well.
Yeah, so before we started recording this, we wanted to spend some time, and of course we've talked a lot, so we're tight on it now, but I think we should come back to this. So I'd love to get listener questions on it as well. But as y'all have been talking about this, I've been trying to think how to describe what it feels like to be on a pelagic, not seasick. That's a different conversation, but that we should have and have talked about someone here as well. But I've always have so much like nervous energy and adrenaline going into it. But as you said, it's sort of this really cool juxtaposition, I'll say, of being on open ocean for many hours. So you've got these times of like almost like a meditative tranquility where there's not much happening. You can focus on really small things and maybe, you know, like you said, the birds that are just kind of hanging out around the boat. But then at the same time, you know that at any moment, something amazing could happen and it could just explode out of nowhere. So like you're always anticipating that too. And maybe something really amazing happens or maybe not, but just
that's a big element of it right there.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when it does, I mean, you never forget it.
Yeah.
I have been in the very beginning stages of doing some sort of like, I don't want to say pelagics for dummies workshop, but something that's like a real pelagics 101 if you've never been on a trip before. Because I've done a lot more pelagics in just the past couple years, but it's still pretty fresh in my mind from when I had absolutely no idea what to expect or how to prepare for one. So I'm trying to capture some of those like changes that I've had and things that I've learned and have that in some sort of workshop kind of format. But I've been thinking about these questions a lot, and I would really like to hear from folks who are listening to this, like, no question too dumb. And what beyond, bird identification should we talk about?
And the other thing too is eventually once you get further into it, the experience is really different depending on which boat or the boat type, and they're different in the East Coast and the West Coast. In the West Coast, we tend to have boats that a lot of times people think, oh boy, we're kind of cramped in here. There's 30 people on a 55-foot boat, and it sort of is the way it is out here. We don't have 100-foot boats. We just don't have the ability to do that. But the way the boats feel is different. The amount of room you might have, boats that have coffee for you versus those that don't provide coffee. There's all this other stuff too that goes on because you do have ebbs and flows in your adrenaline and also in the likelihood of seeing something, and that time heading back to port when you've basically exhausted most of the possibilities and your energy. That's the time where you either want to have a nice old nap somewhere comfortable or just grab a cup of coffee and chat with people. And whether that's possible and comfortable versus not depends on the boat, the weather, and also the people who run the boat too. There are I think historically, pelagic boats were not only stressful because of the situation, but the pelagic operators were a little bit more, I don't know, personalities that were all about the birds and the whales and stuff rather than
boats attract personalities. I feel like
exactly. and I think now there's a little bit more of a client customer based, little nicer aspect of it where people are helpful and they really want. I do. I know you guys, same thing. When you're on boats, you want to have beginners. You want to have people who are new at this and kind of give them a nice first experience, especially if the weather's not great. so that they might go, you know what, I see what's going on here. And boy, if the weather was nicer, this would have been one of the best days ever. Because you got to give it a chance too. Sometimes that first impression is not the best and then you go again and you're like, we've seen it, somebody goes 3 times and then they're hooked, and we get some pelagic junkies.
Yeah, or I'm sure Dorian Anderson's told you about his first pelagic ever.
No.
I took him. We went down to Hatteras, and it was like one of the epic days of all time. But yeah, no, it's true. I think if I always think it's a lot like hawk watching. I use it as well, except that while sitting and standing around, you're always moving.
Yeah.
It's like, so you're sort of constantly breaking new ground, aside from those bits where you might do a little loop here and there, put some chum out and hang out at a spot. That's one of the things I like, is that like the horizon is kind of always, you're just kind of always on the move, and like like at any moment you could put something off the water that, or spot something floating. I just love that aspect of it.
Yeah. I know we've got to wrap up here now. One more thing I want to say on this. Sometimes someone local that's not connected to birding will like ask me about one of my birding trips and be like, oh yeah, I think I'd like to do that. And I have to say, honestly, you're going to be really bored, because we're going to look for hundreds of species of birds you've never seen or heard of. It's like, this is too much. But I was buying a new sleeping pad because I'm doing the next overnight Hillstar pelagic. And at the outdoor store, the guy said, what is this for? And I said, a boat next week. And then we got to talking about it. And he said, that actually sounds pretty cool. And I thought, yeah, if you just have a general interest in nature and the ocean, then you can have a great time on a pelagic.
Yeah.
You don't have to, be as obsessed about birds as you do to, say, do a birding trip to Colombia.
Yeah, and there's not that many creatures out there, so you can actually sort of feel like you remember everything that was
true.
Seen.
Yeah.
And if you have one of the small offshore guides, that Brian Sullivan and Steve Howell put together, it's kind of a little. It's got the mammals, it's got the birds.
Yeah.
And you could feel like, oh yeah, I kind of, I get this. Oh, and I'm not overwhelmed, and that's a cool thing. And there doesn't have to be a rare bird at all, or there's always going to be something that you're going to go, oh my God, I actually saw a blue shark, like a blue shark. I mean, it may be that for people who are out in the ocean, they see them all the time, but an ocean sunfish, a mola mola, or a blue shark, or any one of these creatures, or just a jelly, masses of jellyfish, for a lot of folks are like, I cannot believe I'm seeing this, like that.
Your first good view of an ocean sunfish is not something you'll forget.
Yeah. Especially when they leap out of the water. I don't know if you've ever seen that. It's
heard about it.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. You're like, what was that?
All right, guys, we've got to wrap up here. George has a meeting with his Brazil tour group, and I have a feeling you're going to discuss collectively changing your tickets and going to a football game at the beginning of your trip.
We shall see.
Yeah, keep us updated. Yeah. All right, so send us your questions about pelagics. Send us your feedback about chasing birds. Give us topic suggestions for future podcasts, because we're always looking for those. If you like the tangents that we get on, then the Life List newsletter is great for you, because it's a whole list of all sorts of odds and ends that are somehow related to birds or something we talk about on here. And that comes out every 2 weeks. So it's pretty fun to put together some content that might interest you. All right, guys. We'll talk to you soon. See you next time.
Cheers, everybody.